Short?
In the writing?
I don't think it's short.
Okay.
It's got like 11 agenda items, several drafts.
There's 2 sets of slides.
Oh, yeah, there's not a lot of, huh? What'd you say?
The meeting materials only includes 2 slides.
Right, so the Yang slides are actually on the Tictoc page and not on the NTP page. So that would be one thing. And then some of the other items don't actually have slides. And Harlan's not here. I don't see him online yet, but Harlan's not here. The extension header and ref ID stuff falls off. You don't have to have slides to have discussions, do you? So I can put my banana away. You still don't have it up.
For a minute there, it sounded almost like you said you didn't have test slides.
I said you don't. I did. You don't have to have slides to have discussion. Or not to. Oh yeah, there you go.
So Tully's doing some minutes.
Oh, he is?
Yeah.
Oh, that's wonderful. Can you go back to the beginning of that though? Yeah, so put that upside up. Yeah, that's,
Sorry?
yeah, that's the right side. It looks weird on there, doesn't it?
Yeah, I don't know.
Okay. So we're going to go ahead and get. Is audio on for this?
Yes, just speak louder.
Just speak louder. Ah, that's great. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and get started. This is the NTP and TikTok working group meeting. Let me go to the next slide. Back to the note well. That's kind of weird, isn't it? Go back one.
This one.
Yes.
No, well, it's not well. Which one? NTP?
NTP. So the NTP Jabber room. And I'll pop on TikTok to have people move back over there. All right, so welcome to the NTP and TikTok working group. This is the note well that everybody is aware of. We have Tal has agreed to take our minutes. We are very thankful. And Rich has agreed to be our Jabber scribe. The agenda for today. Go back. Go back. It's very. Okay. So this is the administrivia and agenda bashing portion of the agenda. The first part of this is the NTP working group. We have the network time security work, some data minimization work, the BCP, Dennis is online for that, extension header stuff, and ref ID. I went ahead and put the mode 6 draft on the bottom. We're just going to talk about it very briefly. Brian's not here. And then for TikTok, we have the working group status and also the Yang data model. and next steps. So we'll get to that later when we get to the Tictoc working group. So let's start with the NTS work. So is that you or Daniel?
That's me. Should I stand down?
Yes, in the pink box.
Okay, that's an update of the network time security work. The drafts related to this work have been in the working group last call in the beginning of this year, and the working group last call generated a large amount of comments. So it was decided to form a NTS design work team that discussed these comments and try to find solution for the different open questions. And during the NTP working group interim face-to-face in October this year, we summarized all the discussion in some proposals. I have to mention that all of this discussion in the design team mainly focused on the draft which applies NTS for NTP. So we made proposals for the key exchange. We made a proposal for privacy. That means we decided that NTS shall not leak any information that is suitable to track a client when he moves from one network to another. That is done via a proposal which is submitted by, or was submitted by Daniel Franke. And we also did another proposal for the peering mode. Each of you who was in the IETF meeting in Berlin might remember that there was a decision to postpone the peer mode of NTP, but in the Boston meeting we found Daniel proposed a solution for the how to handle the peer mode, and the consensus was that is a good solution. So next slide, please. That's regarding key exchange. In this table, I tried to summarize the decisions for the peer mode. That is to say, mode 1 and 2 of NTP. The key exchange is done via DTLS, and the NTP packets are then transported as a DTLS payload. That's basically the idea. That's also written down in the draft, in the current draft, version of the draft. The client server mode, modes 3 and 4. There was, we proposed, the current proposal is to use not DTLS, but TLS for the key exchange in order to have a most robust key exchange. And then the NTP packets are transported via UDP via UDP port 123. And the protection information is contained in the NTS extension field. Mode 6 packets, there's an option to use DTLS or TLS for the associated key exchange, and according to the key exchange, also the payload, the packets are transported as payload either over DTLS channel or TLS channel. That's for the key exchange. Then we decided to, that there was, in the last version of the draft, we also piggybacked the key exchange packets over NTP packets. It was decided to postpone this method and only use DTLS or TLS for the key exchange. And we also decided that we will not allow optional key exchange mechanism for NTS for NTP. Next slide, please. There are still some open issues or questions. One is the encoding of the NTS extension fields. In the original draft, there was an ASN1 encoding, and the question is if you want to do this also in the current version, or do we apply some ad hoc binary encoding as the current version is doing, or something else? That's one of the questions. And the second question is, what do we do with the generic part of the NTS specification documents? The idea of this generic document was originally that it should provide protection schemes for unicast and broadcast message time synchronization message types for NTP, and if possible also for PTP. The problem is that until now we got very limited feedback on the protection scheme of the broadcast message types. So that's from my point of view a drawback of the generic part, that this part of the draft is not well reviewed. And also regarding PTP, there's this P1588 working group in the IEEE who is already specifying the security scheme for PTP. So the question is this generic document still necessary? Also in the light that the current version of the NTS for NTP draft is more or less self-contained. Okay, next slide, please.
For the microphone.
There's a
microphone, please. Sorry.
So as of the, pardon? Daniel Franca. So as of the face-to-face interim that we had last month, I think we basically have consensus among the design team on all the major controversial issues. The state of the draft at this point is a bit of a Frankenstein because we've taken our two very different drafts and merge them into one document. So if you go through that document, don't expect everything to make complete sense at this point. We know we're ironing out those issues, but at this point, I think I do hope to be able to ship something to the IESG in time for the next summit in Chicago.
Yes, the next step. What's the last slide?
I don't know, but
yeah, I want to add. It's Kyle Rose. I want to add to what Daniel said that I tried reading the doc about 2 weeks ago. I think it was right after the deadline, the draft deadline, and it hadn't been. I think that version had not been updated to account for the consensus that we achieved at the interim meeting. So I think at this point, unless that's been updated, probably want to hold off on reviewing that until that happens. Is an updated draft expected soon? Like, I mean, are we talking like 2 weeks, a month for something that's closer to
Yeah, I would. Dieter and I met yesterday to talk about editing and timeline issues. I think the ball is basically mostly in my court again at this point. I would shoot. Yeah, I would shoot for somewhere between 2 weeks and a month for a draft that's ready for review.
Is to make it clear, the version as uploaded 2 weeks ago still applies DTLS for the key exchange, also for the client server mode, and this has to be changed according to the meeting decisions we've done in Boston. Also, the privacy consideration section, there's we decided that we want to describe an attack vector for an adversary who is actively monitoring the client, and this is not finished yet. And also, Daniel and I discussed yesterday this the subsection usage of NTP pools in the security consideration, and we also want to update this subsection.
Yeah, so I sent an email to the list a couple months ago with some thoughts on how to deal with NTP pools if you want to be able to do NTS secured NTP. That email did not get any replies, but the issue basically is at this point the draft says this won't work with pools. I don't think that's an acceptable long-term answer if we want to get this protocol in wide usage with no configuration on the user's part. So I'm just, that's good. That's definitely going to be a completely separate effort. It's not something the draft is going to be held up for. But I'm just going to be updating that piece of the security consideration section, just instead of making a statement that it can't be done, just state what some of the challenges are.
Okay, regarding the generic NTS document, I suppose we would be willing to adapt this draft if the working group decide that this is still necessary. Otherwise, we will just drop it. So that's it. Any other comment?
Daniel, I have a quick question for you. I see the message you sent on pools back in August. Perhaps it would be worth resending it just to ask people again to comment on it.
Sure.
Or just, I could do it, but it probably makes more sense for you to do it.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay, so on the base security document, 2 to 4 weeks to get an update, and better off holding off to review that than review the current document. Okay. On the generic document, does anybody have any thoughts about that going forward? Is everybody still digesting their lunch? All right. So that I guess that takes us to the end of the NTS discussion. Okay, so Harlan's list. Okay, Harlan's here now. Okay, great. Any other questions? I do think the face-to-face interim we had was very productive, and I think we got made a lot of progress there. So I look forward to this being wrapped up sooner rather than later. Anshal, did you want to talk a little bit about the MAC document and the CFRG feedback on that?
So basically, to update on the NTP MAC draft, which proposes the secure MAC algorithms for doing symmetric MAC on NTP. We had this draft. We proposed So currently the RFC 5905 proposes using MD5 for a MAC authentication, which is not very secure MAC. So we propose, we do analyze 5 secure MAC algorithms that could be used with NTP. And these 5 algorithms include hash-based algorithms and block cipher-based algorithms. And we choose these algorithms partly because they are standardized in they are RFC standardized, and there are easy open source implementations available for them. So that deployment is not an issue in future. We analyze these algorithms, and based on NTP specific constraints, like we analyze these algorithms for their latency and throughput, because these are the 2 important factors to be considered for NTP. We recommend, based on several factors, security and latency and throughput, we recommend using CMAC, which is a block cipher based algorithm. And yesterday I presented for feedback at the CFRG meeting, and I guess mostly it was a positive heads up reply. So I think that issue is resolved. If you want to add something to it, yeah.
Daniel Franco speaking. So I was at Anshul's CFRG presentation yesterday, and the consensus there seemed to be that no, there's no good way to fix Ghash to make it work for our use case, and that concurring with Anshul that CMAC is probably the right answer.
Yeah. So I think we can go ahead with that draft.
Okay. So that draft is intended to also be backfit into 5905, right? Into the well, not necessarily that draft, but the intention is also to update existing
5905.
Right.
Yes.
Implement. Yeah.
I mean, yeah, we also suggest deprecating deprecate the use of MD5 to deprecate MD5. So that is there in RFC 5905. So this draft would
okay. So because this draft right now is more of a analysis and a justification for a choice.
You're right.
And so I think we can go ahead and move that draft forward. But I was wondering if you or somebody else would mind doing a draft that would basically be the update to deprecate to properly deprecate MD5 and recommend the new algorithm.
Okay. Yeah. I can do that.
Because this draft doesn't really do that. It's more of
Analysis.
It's more of an analysis draft, which I think in and of itself is still worthwhile. But I mean, and maybe go ahead, Daniel.
Yeah, I'll be happy to collaborate on that draft if you'd like.
Okay. And we feel we've gotten enough guidance from the CFRG and other crypto experts that we're happy moving forward with this, right? Yes. Okay. Fabulous. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks.
Look forward to that draft.
Harlan says he'll contribute too.
Okay. All right. So the next thing on the agenda, and you might be right, maybe this will be a short meeting because we're moving quickly through it. NTS had previously taken a lot of time. The next item on the agenda is the data minimization draft. I don't know if you or Anshul wanted to.
So for those of you who weren't at the interim, the idea of the NTP data minimization draft is essentially that the in NTP's unicast client server mode, Most of the fields that the client puts into its packet are not actually used by the server for anything. The server just ignores them and sends back its response. However, those fields in the client packet can be used for fingerprinting and tracking the client, and identify that as the client moves from one network to another, that this is in fact the same system. So the consensus at the last interim is that we should be zeroing out all of those fields in client packets that the server doesn't use. So Anshul and I have put together a draft for that. At this point, I think it's at least ready for working group adoption. Anshul, do you agree? All right. Anshul says yes. So that I think that draft is in pretty good shape. There is, if you look at the, Anshul, please remember to mark that repo public so that people can look at the issue tracker. There's one final issue of contention between me and Anshul. You can see the discussion on the issue tracker about how the polling interval field should be treated. I think we should just throw that to the broader working group at this point. I think the NTP reference implementation implementers will probably have some opinions there. But I think that's the less controversial issue.
Okay, can you send a link to the GitHub rep?
Will do, but Anshul will have to mark it readable first.
Okay. Thank you.
Relaying Anshul, since she's not at the microphone, she says she'll send it.
All right, is there anybody who, well, let me ask this. How many people have read that draft? Having not, well, we have one person. Yes. Okay, so I guess I would like some more people to read the draft, and then we'll do a call for adoption on the mailing list if that's all right. But go ahead. Oh, you're just standing at the mic for the heck of it. To confuse you.
Harlan says that Dave Mills will have an opinion.
Okay. Okay. So the next thing is the BCP, which I believe, if there's not a lot of comments on, I believe is ready for working group last call. Dennis, did you want to say something about it? I see you online, but I don't know if you're actually. Oh, he's joining the queue. Go ahead, Dennis. Okay, now go ahead. Now I've properly pushed the red button.
Hi there. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Is it too loud?
No, it's fine. Go ahead.
Okay. I just wanted to say that there is a draft that's up that is reasonably complete based on everything we know about. Thanks to everybody who contributed. And I think it's ready to go to last call. If there are any, I'm sure there will be further changes as we go through the process, and I'm prepared to apply them all. So thanks to everybody who's contributed so far. And what do we do from here?
Can you briefly summarize the changes you've made since the last time?
Most of the changes have been, most of my changes have been editorial. I know Harlan has made a few changes in terms of some of the areas that he contributed. Mainly it was the changes have been getting rid of sections that were still in the document, which nobody contributed to, and tightening up the wording and making it a bit more consistent.
Okay. I think given given the level of changes that this document has had over the last several months, I think we're ready to move this one to working group last call. There's nothing that you need to do to it before that happens, right?
Not that I know of. Nobody has pointed anything out since the last time I uploaded 2 weeks ago.
Okay. Okay, thank you much. All right, so the next thing on the agenda is extension fields. There's two aspects of this. The first one is further clarification of, I'm going to kick you out of the queue, Dennis, is the issue of issues with 7822. And then the second one is a set of proposals for various extension headers. Harlan, can you get online? Okay.
Hello.
Hi, Harlan.
You want me?
So you have published, we have an individual submission that you published that was to indicate was for fixes to 7822.
Yes.
Can you talk about it briefly?
Basically, there were a number of fresh concepts described in 7822 that I felt were incorrect. So I took 7822 as a standalone document and changed it to represent what I believe reflects the correct history, interpretation, and intent of the changes Danny and Tal wanted to make to, for example, allow extension fields that did not have a MAC address. I also went ahead and augmented the document to better incorporate the extension field information that came with AutoKey, specifically the response and error bits, and then I added the other bits that I believe are important based on the other extension fields that are present, and we are making wonderful progress on getting this deployed for proof of concept and validation. Was that too political?
I'm not sure what too political is, but I do want Tal is going to the microphone right now. I think he just got shocked by the microphone.
Yep.
There's an issue with static here. But before he starts, I do want to remind you that the point of this draft was merely to clarify the clarifications and not to add anything new.
Okay. I don't know if you think I went too far or not, but the bottom line is the document that I have submitted is what I believe satisfies the intent and spirit of what was meant before and how we needed to change it to allow for things like extension fields with no that do not include a MAC, and we'll see how well I did.
Okay, go ahead, Tal.
Okay, Tal Mizrahi from Marvell. So I understand Harlan's point that some clarification is needed. I mean, I can't argue with an implementer. And I think the main thing that is missing for me is to understand the differences between RFC 7822 and Harlan's current draft. I think that a lot of the text is different, but is saying the same things. And what I'm really looking for is a very short list of bullets saying these are the differences. And I mean, I tried reading the draft and it wasn't easy for me to understand what are these differences. And assuming it's a relatively short list, I think we can probably either write a very short draft with some clarifications, or just use RFC 7822 as a baseline and just change or add, you know, a small subsection or something. And I think it would make it easier for the reader. For me, at this point, it's kind of difficult to understand the differences compared to the existing RFC.
May I?
Go ahead.
If RFC 7822 wasn't alive for very long, I'm trying to understand what the benefit is of providing the differences when the intent is that if my revision to 7822 seems reasonable and everything, and we just go to it, if anybody really cares about the differences, they can generate them, or we can use the we might be able to use the difference tool that's already out there. I had a lot of trouble with that because I don't do anything in Word, and the original 7822 is only available in Word. All the work I do is in XML. So it's difficult for me to produce that sort of a difference script, and it also sucks up a lot of time that I honestly just don't have right now.
So Harlan, I think you're taking the word differences a little bit too literally. I think we're not looking for
a diff.
A diff. What we're looking for is what is different about what you're saying versus what was in 7822.
Okay.
I think we took 7822 was a clarification on 5906 or 5905. So apparently that clarification is not quite clear enough yet. So I think what we need to do is to be clear about what's wrong or what's different or what you want changed.
Okay.
I mean, in the process of publishing 7822, one of the some of the feedback that we got was if we needed to be clear what we were changing from the original RFC.
Yes.
And
If you're
this
wait
is
a minute,
still
are you talking about between when 7822 was created, what the differences were and what it was clarifying?
Yes.
Okay, then I'm trying really hard here. It did not do an appropriate, in my opinion, it did not do an appropriate job of saying what was clarification and what was new cloth.
What was clarification and what was new cloth?
Yeah.
So you think
It took great liberties, in my opinion.
well, perhaps.
Well, put another way, if we need to have this done, that's great. I'm trying to avoid a situation where there are, should I say, discussions or arguments about whether or not a word that was originally used meant what other people might think it would mean, and get into that sort of contest. So I would, my preference is to avoid that issue, avoid any of that sort of discussion completely, and just make forward progress.
I think the way to make forward progress is to identify what's different from 7822.
Okay, 7822 makes lots of discussions.
Not
Not now?
Harlan, not verbally to me,
Okay.
but in the document.
That will take me a while. I'm going to be stupid busy for at least another couple of weeks. But we can eventually get there if this is really that important.
So Tal and Danny wrote the original 7822, and they're co-authors on your document. Can the three of you work offline to get this done?
Yeah, but that'll, the answer to your question is yes. It's going to take some effort on, if Danny and Tal are willing to put some effort into it as well, then that can happen. By that can happen, I mean, if the three of us work on it together, the three of us will work on it together.
So Tal again, so first of all, sure, I'd be happy to work on it. What I would like to suggest is that maybe I can have a go at it and try to use RFC 7822 as a baseline, as the baseline for the text.
That's what I did.
And only make small modifications in cases where it seems there's a conflict between the two drafts. And maybe we can...
Let's give it a try.
Have a review about that.
Let's give it a try.
Okay.
Okay, but we are in agreement that the scope of this draft is merely to clarify 7822, which is a clarification of 5905.
It's going to take a half step. It's going to take a little bit more than, I took it a smidge or two farther, because there are flag bits used in 5906 that my goal here was to look at the way we're going, which is we have 5905, which is the core base standard. We've got 5906, which is auto key, and now we've got 7822, which talks about extension fields. And looking as this is a place of moving forward, I'm expecting 7822 could well become a place where we talk about future extension fields as opposed to adding on lots of extra RFCs that may describe a specific extension field, but the intent is that when you want to see what do I do with an extension field, you look at 7822 and you either find a chapter or a section in there that talks about this new one, or there's some other RFC out there that has the guts of that specific extension field, and we don't have to keep repeating a lot of boilerplate because 7822 has all of that.
Right. I just think it might be easier to get this done. I mean, I think future drafts can have multiple new extension headers defined, but I think that it would be easier to simplify the clarification of how extension headers work from the definition of new extension headers, and I'd prefer to see those stay separate, and that's what we've talked about before. Go ahead, Kyle.
Hey, Kyle Rose. A point of information, since I wasn't around presumably when this started, are these changes that we're proposing to 7822 on the level of errata, or were there normative, like incorrect normative changes that were introduced by 7822 that Harlan's trying to correct? I'm trying to understand the scope of the problem here, and whether this is just a case of we need to replace these words in 7822 and some punctuation gets moved around and whatnot. I'm just wondering what the scope of the changes is.
May I speak off the record effectively?
No.
Okay.
Not here.
Not here, no. You're on
Okay.
the record.
Well, Karen, do you know what I'm about to say?
Yes, but you're going to say it anyway.
No, if you tell me not to say it, I won't say it.
I'm not going to tell you not to say it.
My opinion is that 7822 had bad content in it and that bad content needs to be excised and replaced with correct content, and that's what my proposal does. it accomplishes the spirit of what Danny and Tal wanted to accomplish with 7822, and it does it in a way that provides an accurate assessment of what the original intent was and how we expect to have things go in the future.
So doesn't this seem like a candidate for a 7822 bis? Like start with 7822 and
Yes.
change some words and move some stuff around to get exactly what was intended originally.
Yes.
Okay.
That's exactly what I've been trying to achieve. Okay. So anyway, Tal has agreed very patiently to work on this with Harlan and Danny.
With luck, it won't require too much patience on his part.
All right. So the next thing we have is the list of the new extension header proposals. Can you bring up? Oh, I don't have the drafts listed there, do I? They're on the agenda. Okay. So Harlan, we're going to start the first new extension field is the last EF.
That's a combination of last EF and Mac EF. And basically the purpose here is to permit and encourage people to use a Mac in an extension field moving forward, so we no longer have to worry about a legacy Mac. And additionally, to ease the parsing burden, there is a new extension field that says, I am the last extension field. So in that case, anything that follows that would be a legacy. At the moment, the only thing that we'd see out there is a legacy Mac, but who knows what exciting things we may choose to do in the future. So there's that one, and yeah, Mac as an EF is pretty basic. It's just a way to put Macs into an extension field. So it shouldn't be that big of a deal. Is Danny on the call?
Danny is not. He's on
Okay.
Skype.
Fair enough. Assuming he can hear, I don't know if he can participate. Danny believes that the last EF is not needed, and let's just say we have a strong disagreement there.
Go ahead, Tal.
Tal Mizrahi. Regarding the last EF, currently there is an experimental RFC which defines the checksum complement extension field, and it defines that the checksum complement, if it exists, it's the last extension field.
It would not have to be with this, but it could be.
Yeah, so we have to think about how these two would work together. Maybe we can create a new extension field which is, you know, a combination of last and checksum complement.
Well, the only reason to use last EF is if you know you're going to put a legacy Mac after it. And if you know you're not going to put a legacy Mac, there's no reason to have a last EF. Therefore, it shouldn't conflict with your checksum complement field. And the other thing I'll mention is, if the purpose for the checksum complement is to give you a means to rewrite the packet on the fly to change the transmit timestamp, correct?
Yep.
Okay, so one of the benefits here is that if it is possible to have a basic NTP time packet that is protected by a Mac and have a timestamp correction extension field that would be after the last, after any other extension fields where no legacy Mac would be provided, and it would include a correction instead of a rewritten transmit timestamp. And that would also allow us to do things like accumulate transmission delays along the path from host A to host B. So in those cases, a last EF would not be used because there would not be any legacy Mac following it.
So I think what you're saying, correct me if I'm wrong, is that the last EF and the checksum complement EF are mutually exclusive anyway.
I
That's
would
what you're
expect
saying?
them to be mutually exclusive, yes.
Okay, so there should probably be some text about that in the draft.
Okay, if you think it's necessary, you know, anybody who looks at it would say, gee whiz, we can't use these two things together, and wouldn't. But, you know, whatever y'all think. I like to give implementers some room because they may know things that we don't. And I mean, I know things, you know what I mean? If I'm going to implement something, I'd like people to trust me to do a proper implementation. So to me, it's not a big deal.
I don't think it hurts to document assumptions. I mean, if there is agreement here that these two don't go together, that they're mutually exclusive, then I don't think it hurts to document that they're mutually exclusive as opposed to giving somebody the opportunity to figure that out on their own.
That's fine. And my point is that the checksum complement proposal is specifically geared to deal with a situation where somebody's modifying an NTP packet. And there are going to be environments where the intent of that, which is to avoid interleave mode, is to come up with a higher precision NTP timestamp. And in that case, you would want the base NTP packet, any other extension fields, an extension field MAC EF, and an extension field MAC, followed by what would be MAC optional timestamp corrections or delay calculations. And doing, you know, at that point, you don't. The only thing we need to say is if you use a legacy, if you use that thing, you don't want to be using a checksum complement. But if we choose to call that extension field something other than checksum complement, then sure, it's fine to go ahead and say checksum complement cannot be used in the presence of a legacy MAC or a last EF.
Okay, go ahead, Daniel.
Yeah, Daniel Franca speaking. On the proposal for the MAC extension field, there is a provision in there for adding random padding to the end of the MAC tag in an attempt to conceal the length of the MAC and therefore what algorithm is in use. Commenting on an earlier version of this draft, I wrote to the mailing list a few months ago explaining why this doesn't work. Danny wrote back to me promptly saying that you were intending to remove that, but I see that it's still present in the current draft. Has something changed there, or is that still going away?
I don't care if, you know, if folks say they feel that there's never any reason to add padding, great. Does this need to be a cast in stone thing, or is there any benefit to leaving it as a local policy choice?
Rich Salzakamai. So far now in this document, which is describing how extensions are laid out, we've got two local policy choices proposed, which means there's two squared possible ways that interop could go wrong. Nail everything down.
Okay, what are the two ways that you think things could go wrong? Or what am I missing?
So the example you said where someone would add a checksum adjustment after.
Okay.
And the one where somebody may pad something for apparently no good reason according to the security analysis.
Well, according to one security analysis.
Okay, so I work at the same. No, wait a minute. The one, yeah, okay, fine. The one security analysis we've had. Just don't do it.
Okay.
Here's the second one. Here's the second one. Padding the MAC gives you nothing.
Okay. If that's the case, is that always going to be true in the future? If
Yes.
you can state that always in the future this is a bad idea, then I don't care. We don't allow it. If there's a chance.
The algorithm ID that identifies the MAC will imply the length. Always.
That's correct. So given that there is no algorithm ID currently associated with a MAC in the data field, this means that if folks are saying it really doesn't matter if padding will never buy you anything there, great. It's not a big deal to me either way.
So apparently so, since two people have said don't do it. But
yeah, but I've had other people tell me go ahead and do it.
Yeah, but they don't. Okay, security folks.
People who claim to know something about security.
All right, have them post on the list.
Okay.
I think there's a general philosophy that we should not leave escape hatches for variations that we might need in the future. Let's just get this. I mean, NTP has been, you know, the redhead stepchild of the network in terms of network security for a really long time. Let's just get the one spec nailed down. We know exactly what all the bytes on the wire are. And I don't want to be in a position where I have to trust the implementer.
Okay.
Okay. Any additional comments on this draft? All right, so the I-Do draft, Harlan?
Okay, so, oh, these are just the basic ref ID drafts now. The I-Do draft is,
No.
oh, this isn't on the agenda then, or am I?
No, it is on the agenda. It's on the agenda. You and I spent an hour discussing yesterday morning.
Yeah, but I'm looking at something that says agenda on this session, and I'm not seeing I-Do in there. So that's not an issue. The I-Do draft is an extension field that allows one side to say, here's a list of things I'm willing to tell you that I can do. And the biggest reason for this is there are going to be a lot of implementations out there or code out there that we hope has gone ahead and said, if you see an extension field you don't recognize, just ignore it. But there may be implementations out there that say, if I get an NTP packet with an extension field that I don't recognize, I'm just going to drop it. So this gives people the ability to offer an I-Do with an initial query, and if they don't get a response, they can send the next packet without an I-Do and see if they get a response. And if so, they know, hey, I better not send I-Do to that other server. If they do get a response, it gives people a way to negotiate and agree on other things that may or may not be available. Specifically things like the suggested ref ID, or do you do NTS, or anything else out there. This also goes toward some of the other proposals I've got out there where we can offer whether or not we do, whether or not we're offering leap smeared time and things like that, or we have the ability to offer a leap smear ref ID in things like that. So basically it's informational, and the beauty of it is once you do it, you can renegotiate it at any time. So it may be that if machine A wants to talk to machine B, it does some I-Do stuff, and lo and behold, once NTS or something has been negotiated, one side says to the other, well, since you've authenticated to this degree, I'm also going to let you know that the following other options are now potentially available to you. So that opens the door to things like authorization as well as authentication, and just makes things a lot cleaner.
Okay. Does anybody have any comments on the I-Do draft? Okay, the next extension field one you have,
Karen?
Harlan, is yes.
At one point, Sharon said she was real concerned about I-Do because she wanted to make sure it didn't provide any downgrade or something else attacks. I haven't heard back from her, but I will say that I-Do is informational, not compulsory, and I'm not aware of any problems that there might be with it, but I just wanted to, put it out there because it's something Sharon mentioned at the last meeting.
So let me ask something following a little bit up on what Rich was talking about. Historically, the only use of extension fields was AutoKey. And then we added the experimental checksum complement extension field. and now we're adding a whole bunch of extension fields. Do you think that there's a priority order of these, or is there one that you think is most important?
I'm planning to implement a bunch of these.
You what?
All the ones that I've proposed, I'm planning to implement. And if there are others that get proposed, I mean, the only one I'm not planning to implement is we aren't going to be doing checksum complement because we're not planning on rewriting the transmit timestamp.
So my question to you is, are we opening up a can of worms by adding all of these additional extension fields?
I don't think so. I think we need them.
Okay. So the next one on your list is extended information.
Yes, I'd have to look that one up, but which I can do right now if I'm really lucky. There's certain bits of information, and I apologize for not having that proposal up right now. I'm waiting on my screen. There's at least 2 or 3 bits of information that are nice to have come along. And let me find extended information. There it is, 00, 4 pages long. Waiting on my severely underpowered computer. Basically, if anybody there wants to take a quick look, as I recall, there are 2, possibly 3 bits. Oh yeah, that included leap smear information and something else. Show full document text. Yeah, so basically it's extra information, whether or not you have the TAI offset in the low order 8 bits, and that was important because there are people out there who are actively using AutoKey for the sole purpose of getting the TAI offset. There is currently no way to see whether or not one side knows it's in interleave mode. And so with this, we've got an indicator that this is a packet that's in interleave mode. So this is a fairly extendable proposal. If you need more bits, we've got a whole lot of them. And we don't need to extend on a different one unless we also start needing more than, we've got another 8 bits in that first content data. So we've got 8 more bits of data, and we've got 14 bits left for flag information. So this is something where will say, I do extended information, and the other side says, go for it, I want to know. This gives us a real easy way to do TAI offset without requiring AutoKey, and it lets us solve a problem with interleave mode. So it doesn't take 3 to 4, 3 pole intervals to reset from an interleave problem.
Tal Mizrahi, do we have a draft that defines interleave mode?
Probably not yet. I mean, that's something that's been in the code for a really long time. I don't know if anybody ever wrote, Dave wrote a couple of white papers about it, but when the time comes, it'll be there.
So maybe we want to add something to the current draft that describes what interleave mode is, because most of the readers may not be familiar with the code.
Okay, that's fine.
Also a question in general, is this draft defining or allocating some of the bits in the field type value?
Yes. This has a recommended field type information for the field type is 9, and it can either be 0009 for an extended information that would require a MAC, or 2009 for extended information that doesn't require a MAC.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm. I guess there's other ones, because I'm also using the code, because this goes to the other one. I was planning to use the code word of 1, meaning it's a version 1. So If we wanted to do it the other way and say this is version 1 of the extended information, it would be 0109 for a version 1 extended information field that requires a Mac, and 2109 for a Mac optional version 1 extended information field. I don't really have a strong opinion on it either way, you know. We could call the first one version 0 and go to version 1 on the next one. Yeah.
Go ahead, Anshel.
Anshul, so I wanted to say that the interleave mode is not described anywhere in the draft. It's and it's there is no reference implementation for it, so it will be
There
good if
has
we can.
been, but okay.
I mean, there is no reference implementation. There is just a direct implementation. There is no sample implementation for it, right?
I don't know.
In the draft.
It's been in the code for a long time. It's got a problem that we're working on fixing, but we haven't had time to fix it. But this went through huge amounts of study, complete with government-funded make sure it works things, and it was proven to be working. So there was a code problem, and let's just say sometime, do I want to say this? Dave uses a style of description that is not one I'm used to reading, and this is something where we have other code, and it's going to take me a whack of time to figure out where the missing line of code is, based on reading his papers and looking at some of the other sample code.
Yeah, it's a very high-level description of what an interleave mode is. There is no code or any.
Oh yeah, there is. We've got sample code and everything, but it just isn't in the a working implementation right now. No, let me rephrase that. The code if you tell both sides to work in interleave mode, they will work. If you want to have dynamic interleave mode, there's a bug in that.
Yes, there is an implementation for interleave mode, but
Yes.
there is no specification like how to implement the interleave mode. There is very high level description of it. That's all, right?
No, there are complete implementation instructions in white papers. There is no RFC implementation. There is no RFC description of it.
Okay, so I would suggest we should add it to RFC 5905 probably, if we are already
Right.
doing
Well,
it.
actually, a number of years ago, we asked for volunteers to help write it, and we could never get anybody to document it.
So we can do that, I guess.
Yes, it would be great. Absolutely great to have somebody
Absolutely
document that feature.
Okay.
Rich Sauls, Akamai. So I just want to make sure I understand. There is nothing in an RFC that would make an implementation possible, and the one implementation has some bugs. Is that it?
That's a little harsher than I would say, but that's, you know, if both sides, in the reference implementation, if you tell both sides to run interleave mode, it works great.
And if you don't tell both sides to run an interleave mode, it doesn't work. I'd call that a bug, but whatever.
It won't fall out of it, but it will work when both sides flip into it. And I will say that, to my knowledge, this is actually working in practice, because I think this is something that, if I'm not mistaken, I think they're using it, JPL or somebody's using it on some space missions.
Do we have new documents like those that aren't already published that reference this interleave mode?
What do you mean by new?
That's not already published. Not already published as an
knowledge,
RFC.
There are plenty of non-RFC documents that discuss this.
That's not what I asked. I asked if we have anything, if this working group has anything in the pipeline.
No,
It's
there's
not
nothing
yet
in
in
the
RFC.
pipeline about interleave mode.
Harlan, you're not
Thank you.
You're not listening.
No, okay. I think he answered the question, but let me repeat it. Does this working group have anything in the pipeline that has the words interleave mode in it?
No.
Thank you. That's all.
Right. The one we were just talking about. The extended information one does.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
So the way the white papers describe the interleaved mode, it's not the way how it is implemented actually. So that's why there is bug. There's a gap, and that's why there is a bug, and that is the reason why I was saying there should be a formal specification for it in the RFC.
Yes, we want a formal definition of it, and we plan to have working code as soon as we've got the resources to chase down the bug.
Go ahead, Suresh.
Okay, so I have a slightly different, Suresh Krishnan, so I have a slightly different point. There's like a whole bunch of these extension field documents. Like, is it possible that we can put them all together, like if the working group wants them to? And also, if you're doing a 7822 BIS, like, can you also check? Okay, go. You said no. Are we doing a 7822 BIS?
We are doing a 7822 BIS. What I
Okay.
wanted to do was separate the 7822 BIS from all of the extension header fields, proposals, the new ones. I think it makes perfect sense to combine some of these into a single document. It says these are what some new extension headers are.
It's because like if you just like have a whole bunch of documents, right? Like if you want to fix something in one of them, then you had to go fix stuff in two of them or three of them, right? And it
That's
just
why
puts like unnecessary. Yeah, go ahead, Harlan.
Yeah, that's why I wanted to have 7822 be the top level discussion of stuff that generically goes on in extension fields. And if we go ahead and have subsections for each extension field in a single document, that's great. If we have a second, if we have extension fields be separate RFCs, they say C7822 or 7822 BIS for the overhead stuff. Here are the guts of what we're doing here. And then you don't have to make a correction that fixes things in multiple documents.
Okay, so Karen, your proposal sounds good to me. So
Okay.
7822 BIS and combine like the bunch of some, like, I don't know, some omnibus extension field draft, right? Like whatever the group agrees to work on.
Right.
Okay, thanks.
I do think to Rich's point, though, if we have an extension field document that talks about a feature that we haven't actually documented, we need to get the underlying feature documented first.
Okay, or leave a note. Yeah, I understand.
All right. And suggest our ref ID.
The suggested ref ID extension field happens because machine A doesn't get to tell machine B what to use for its ref ID. From the original days, that was machine A's IPv4 address. Then we decided we'd better use a hash of system A's IPv6 address. And there is no way for a server to say, if you use me as your system peer, here's the ref ID I want you to use. And while the not you ref ID is one way to accomplish this, it assumes that the other side has perfect information, which cannot be guaranteed. So the purpose of the suggested ref ID extension field is that when machine A talks to machine B, machine A says, if you use me as your system peer, this is the ref ID you should use. And that way there's a reserved area of network space that can be used for that. We can discuss whether or not these things need to be aged and regenerated every so often or not. That's not anything that I think is terribly significant. And the net effect of which is, with all that many bits and the size of the expected size of an NTP mesh, even if you generate 24 bits randomly, you're going to be, the odds of collision are very small, and the risk in that case is very small of a collision. So.
Okay. So we have 4 drafts on the table that are related to the definition of new extension fields.
Isn't there also a leap smear ref ID and maybe something else on the ref ID drafts?
There's the ref ID updates.
Okay.
draft,
Okay.
which is separate.
Okay.
So anyway, we have these 4 on the table right now. If people could take a quick look through them and provide any immediate feedback, that would be great. And then Harlan, I think we need to think about whether there's a way to combine these into a single draft on the definition of new ref IDs. The definition of new extension fields.
So you'd like to have a 7822 BIS that includes the new overall
No.
language.
I want a 7822 BIS that clarifies 7822. And
Yeah.
then I want a second draft that defines new extension fields.
Okay.
The agenda that's online for this meeting, Harlan has them all listed.
Oh, yeah, I'm looking at the slide that's up. Yeah, I get that. I'm just looking at the slide.
That's the summary slide. It's not, doesn't have all the individual drafts on it, but if you look at the agenda online, it has all the individual drafts, and it's the conversation you and I had yesterday,
Yes, ma'am.
binning the various drafts into the various categories. All right, so we done with extension fields? Great. Ref ID draft. Draft IETF NTP Ref ID updates. It's the one that you and Sharon did together.
Yes, let me, I'm looking for that one now. Okay, ref ID updates 00. So in this one, we address the possibility, we address the issues with, sorry, I'm getting an echo through here that's mildly distracting. IPv6 ref IDs, so we want to make sure they don't ever collide with an IPv4 address. And let's see, the not you ref ID, which we mentioned before, and the leap smear ref ID. And to do a quick summary, the not you ref ID says if the client has good reason to believe that the other side isn't its system peer, it can respond with a ref ID, which as I recall is 127.127, et cetera, et cetera. And if the ref ID would be an IPv6 hash that would otherwise be 127.127, you know, a total of 4 times, it goes to 127 times 3 plus with a 128 on the end of it. And that's enough to make sure that nobody will think that someone will decide they aren't, that the other side isn't using you as their system peer. And so it's possible, if that information is incomplete, that there would then be a timing loop, but that'll eventually get handled as the 2 servers start slowly increasing their stratum until either they disconnect completely from each other or some other server in the peer in the clique decides, you know, is better weighted. Let's see, that was the not you ref ID. The next one is, I'm scrolling through trying to read these in the document. Then there's a leap smear ref, huh?
There's the IPv6 ref IDs, the next one in the table of contents anyway.
Oh, thank you. I'm not trying to find that when I read it. Okay, so the IPv6 one, here we go. That's 3.1 or something. Basically, in the old days, we were using 4 bytes of a hash. In this one, the first of those bytes is 255, which will never be a valid IPv4 address. So it identifies very clearly to people who can see the ref ID that this is an IPv6 ref ID that has the other 3 bytes of something. And the good news is, in current versions of NTPQ, we're now starting to print the ref ID out as a string of hex digits instead of an IP address, because with the appears command, we not only show the ref ID, we also show the association ID, and you can use the association ID if you have proper credentials to actually see who you're getting your packets from. So yeah, so that was the IPv6. And in the leap smear one, the problem is that leap smear should only be offered as server responses to client requests. And from everything I have seen, it's really useful to know when your server is giving you leap smeared time or not. And with this proposal, we get a clear indication that leap smeared time is being offered because that first octet of the ref ID will be, what is it, 253 or something? I'm scrolling around. The ref ID is sent to a system peer. Reading. 222. So yeah, so there's another high number. It's going to be 252 or 253. I forget which one it is because it's not showing up cleanly when I scroll through the document. And then we have a number of bits that provide a 2-digit signed integer portion, and I guess that would be 22 bits of leap smear, which is good to get you to a quarter of a microsecond or something.
Okay, has anybody in the room read this document? Oh yeah.
It's been out for a while, and it's, I believe that's what we've got. We had this in the code for the last leap second.
Okay, so why don't we take a review of these documents to the list? Are there any comments or questions about them here? No. Okay, great. So that takes us to the end of the ref ID drafts. The next thing I just wanted to mention briefly is the draft Haberman NTP working group mode 6 commands. This was the one that was discussed in the Berlin meeting. And he has updated it, I believe, based on some of the text. It was either Sharon or Anshaw. I don't remember which one of you sent him text. But if you would give a chance, if you wouldn't mind just taking a quick, I don't know if you've had a chance yet to read this or not, Anshaw, but if you could give it a quick read through to see if it addressed the concerns that were brought up in the last meeting. And I know Brian's not online, so we'll skip over that. But this one should be fairly straightforward, and we ought to be able, if those issues have been addressed, we ought to be able to send this one to working group last call. This is something that was in 1305 and got left out of 5905, and this was sort of a backfit to make sure that this piece was documented. But even after it was documented and people use it, we did want to point out that we don't actually, that you need to use it with care, kind of thing. All right, that brings us to the end of the NTP portion of the working group. The next thing on the agenda is the Tictoc. If you go to the next slide, please. Oh, is Suresh heading to the mic? Yes.
Suresh Krishnan. So I do have some bad news regarding Tictoc. And there's this draft, the PTP MIB, that went
Yeah, it's on the next agenda.
It's on the slide? Okay.
Yeah, well, not the, it's on the working group status slide. So
Okay.
You can just go on to the next slide.
Okay, so when it says external review, the problem was like one of the ADs took a discussed position on it. That was the Gen AD, that is Yari, the IETF chair, and that was regarding copyright for IEEE documents. Okay, and there's like a lot of back and forth, and I requested permission from the IEEE myself as like on behalf of the IETF for reuse of the text, and the IEEE came back with some conditions like to put on the draft, and the IETF lawyer, there is one, declined to follow those restrictions. Okay, so I escalated it, and there was a meeting of the IETF trust this morning who decided not to take those conditions. So like they say, like either go back to the IEEE and get them to relax the conditions, or change everything to a reference instead of text. Okay, so those are pretty. I forwarded the mail to you, Karen. So those are the options. They are not looking very good. I don't like any of them, but That's what it's come down to now. Okay. So yes, we've done stuff in the past. Yes, there's been other stuff, but not with. So most of the stuff we've done here is like with 802, and there seems to be a better relationship between the 802 and IETF than IEEE and IETF. Okay, so does that make sense?
No, it doesn't make any sense at all. I
No,
don't
no, no,
understand
that-
why
no.
this has become so difficult.
Okay, so I'm with you on this, but I'm just trying to understand if what I said makes sense. Like not whether it makes sense.
The situation doesn't make sense, but
Right,
what you have
okay.
just said,
Okay. Okay.
I
So
understand.
it is what it is. Okay. So we'll sit down together probably in the next day or two and try to figure out like how to get out of this. But the draft as is not going forward at this point. Okay.
Okay. Anyway, the rest of the Tictoc working group, the multipath synchronization is in the RFC editor queue. The MIB we've already talked about. The enterprise profile has completed working group last call, and we need a shepherd write-up on that. And that last draft, I think we are just going to end up dropping because it completed working group last call, and there was a set of, we needed the editor to make some changes, and it's now been, I don't know, a year and a half, 2 years. It's just, it was going to be an experimental RFC on the use of 1588 over MPLS. I think we should just drop it. Okay, great. So that brings us to the Yang module for 1588, which is kind of funny since we just talked about the results of the 1588 MIB and how exciting that was. So, do you have his slides? Oh, I forgot to send you his updated slides.
Yeah, no problem.
No problem.
Actually, there's no change on the slide itself, but
Okay.
some notes.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Good afternoon, folks. This is a summary of the updates to the Yang module on 1588. Currently, the IEEE 1588 work group is almost finished the 2017 version of the IEEE 1588 documents. They have reached a consensus to standardize the Yang module in our Tictoc work group. But they want to be certain that after the publication of this work, they can be transferred to the IEEE 1588 work group for future revisions. That's the current situation in 1588 work group. In the IEEE 22.1, the TSN work group used to develop the 82.1 AS revision. They have this standard is focused on the timing and the synchronization.
Just
for
one
the.
second. Tal, you had a question?
I just wanted to ask whether there wasn't a copyright issue with this draft as well.
There probably will be, but we'll figure that out.
Yeah.
Well, the thing was that the last draft uses a lot of text in the description of the objects and stuff, and so I think we need to be more clear. And that was what he was saying. We need to use references instead of actual text. So we'll just have to. It's not the data structures that are being copyrighted. It's the text that describe.
Yeah.
What caught the Gen Art reviewer that sent us down this long winding path's attention was the amount of text that was copied. Go ahead, Suresh.
Suresh Krishnan. So Karen, like like refresh my memory, right? So this was supposed to go to the IEEE, right? This
This was the-
document, right? Like was supposed to move to the IEEE. Like didn't we have this like talk like where the authors had to sign off the rights to take it back there?
This is supposed to go this would eventually transition to the IEEE, but they're not ready to do it yet.
Okay.
The IEEE 1588 group wants our support and wants us to help do this because they don't have any expertise in Yang modules.
Mhm.
And so they don't have Yang module expertise. And this group has a number of the same participants there and can get Yang review here. So at the working level, this makes perfect sense. I don't know why. I don't know how we ended up at the stage where we ended up with lawyers involved in it, but I mean, IEEE 802 has worked this out so that we know how to do this, but apparently the rest of IEEE.
Right. And 802 has not fully worked it out either because like they have a Yang module for like 802.1 that is like got some issues as well, right? Like it's so there's some things that have been worked out, but the problem is really, right, it's really on our side, right? Like we want people to get permissions to do derivative works of this, whatever we publish, right? So when you say transition, if it becomes a working group document and like version 23 transitions over, like we won't have an issue, right? Right. So I looked at the draft itself, right? And it, yeah, as you said, it's like got much less text copied over, but there is still text copied over, right? And we are going to hit the same issue, like, and I can go back around and try to spin on this, but I'm not sure, like, because both sides are not willing to compromise on their positions, right? The IEEE, what they call like risk management and stuff like that. Like, I have no, as I said, like I have no idea how it got involved, right? So, right, but the point is, like, IEEE is not willing to compromise, IETF is not willing to compromise, like with the IETF statement. So I just don't see a way forward, like as is.
Well,
so the reference works.
Well, what you said earlier was that the draft would have to change before it, going back to the MIB, you said the MIB draft would have to change before moving forward.
Yes.
So we understand what changes need to be made to the MIB to move that forward. So we use that as the starting point for the Yang module.
Yeah, makes sense. So as long as it's like all references, you're okay.
Right.
Okay. Yeah.
I do. Thank you. Hi, Jody Haas for IEEE SA. So this is the first I'm hearing. We did not get a response from Trust. So Suresh, let's get together afterwards and see if we can talk and work it out. Okay, because we have not gotten a response. We sent a response to a question back and there was no response saying, look, we can't work with this. Can we do something even?
Right. Well, this has been elevated out of my hands for like
I'm
6
just saying,
months.
From
I'm
the
like,
IEEE point of view, we didn't know.
Oh,
So,
it's just now.
yeah, so we'll get together.
yeah, you all get together and talk. That would be great.
Sure.
All right.
Okay, let's continue. Both IEEE 802.1 and 1588 are developed in the IEEE, but the MIBs are not well aligned with each other. But in future, the Yang module for the 802.1 AS will be based on the foundation of 1588 Yang module. So that's this document. So lastly, the broadband forum. They have to start the work on the support for SDN in the access nodes. And also they will develop Yang modules to support the softwareization of these nodes. There are also other open source communities for developing Yang modules. If the time-sensitive applications are supported or to be supported by them, I believe Yang module for 1588 will also be required there. Here we give the summary of the changes for this version. The objective is mainly to resolve the requirements from the IEEE 1588. The main difference is the introduction of instance and instance list. They are both the new concepts in for the 2008 version, but they are required in both 82.1 AS and 1588 version 2017. Actually, it's very interesting that our 1588 MIP has such a concept here already. So, in fact, it's not a new idea. Other changes include moving the TC attributes to the node level rather than keep it in the instance level. Finally, we added an appendix to resolve the concerns from IEEE 1588 side. So how to transfer the future revision work to them. This is the sculpture of this young module hierarchy that introduced the instance number and the instance list and move the transparent clock attributes to the node, to the root. So that's all. Next step, there is some comments raised by Joe in the one group's main list. So the next version will resolve all of his comments. I believe most of them are just the editorial one. So it's quite easy to solve them. We would like to welcome more work group reviews and comments, and hope to progress it to the last call as soon as possible. That's all. Thank you. Any comments?
Okay. Just for folks in the room to understand that this will this work is also being reviewed by the 1588 working group for the 1588 portions of this. So there is feedback going back and forth. So. All right. That brings you're welcome. So that brings us to the end of the agenda. We just have next steps. We're looking to continue doing, moving forward, to continue doing virtual interims, probably once a month. We'll get those scheduled, probably December, January, February. I think that sort of keeps, we are making better progress since we started doing that. And also, we still do need to recharter, combine NTP and Tictoc into one working group. And sort of consolidate all of the time stuff into a single working group. As you can see, there's not a lot left in the Tictoc working group to start with. So, any questions, comments? Okay, with that, we are adjourned. Thank you all for coming.
What? You're smiling. I'm not. Oh, okay. Only on the outside. Interested. So let's see. line clear until some of these actually become standardized.